Hey guys, and welcome back to Monster Hunter Rise. In today's video, we're talking about how to see the monster weaknesses and info to fight them correctly or professionally if you're trying to do the most damage. So to do this, all you have to do is capture or beat a monster for the first time, and then they will be loaded into your Hunter Notes located over here in the info panel, Hunter Notes, and you go to Large Monsters, and then you navigate to the monster. For this case, I'm going to go to a Tigrex. So here's the T-Rex. You can see I've hunted this one 3 times. You can see its threat level is 7 stars out of 10, the longest time that it's taken to me to kill it, and the shortest time it's taken me to kill it. You can also find the known habitats that you'll find a T-Rex in, which is a Frost Islands, Sandy Plains, and the Lava Caverns, as well as some characteristics about the monster that sometimes might actually give you some information to dealing with the monster. In this one, it doesn't seem like there is a hint or a tip here, but some of them will actually give you a hint on like how to actually deal with them. Such as Magnamello, where it says here, use a deodorant or a wirebug to get rid of the hellfire that he will put on you if he hits you with that orange kind of flames. But back to Tigrex. So on here, you can actually load a picture of your own picture of Tigrex, which is pretty cool. I actually want to do this for all the monsters eventually. But what you can do is press R and go to the physiology, press A, and you can actually see there's a bunch of information here that might be very confusing at first to understand what you're looking at. So I'm going to break this down in the simplest way I can think possible. So in here you can see it indicates different body parts of the Tigrex, like the tail base, the hind leg, the back, the abdomen, which is like the stomach, the foreleg, and the head. And then if you look to the right of these names, you'll see there's 3 different types of weapons. The one looks like a greatsword, the other one looks like a hammer, and the third one looks like a kind of bullet, right? So obviously things like your greatsword, your longsword, your dual blades, and things like that will be in the first section over there, where the greatsword icon is, this one over here. Things like the hammer and the hunting horn will be in that second column, which falls under blunt damage. The third one is for things like the light bow gun, the heavy bow gun, as well as the bow, and I believe maybe even some attacks that some of the other weapons do that are ranged, such as the gun lance's ability to fire off a few shots as well. Now before we look on to all of those different elements on the right side, let's focus clearly on the slashing, the blunt, and the ammo type damage right over here. So you'll see there's a bunch of different numbers here, and all of a sudden you're like, math, I hate math, math is not good for me, but it's really not that confusing. So take your weapon that you're playing right now. For me, it would be the hunting horn, right? So the hunting horn, I'm going to look at that hammer icon, that hammer column right over there. So you can see with the hammer, I'm going to be doing 70 damage against the head, whereas on the foreleg, I'm going to be doing 45 damage. And if you look at all of the other ones here, you can see the abdomen 30, the back 25, the hind leg 30, the tail base 35, and the tail 35. So what this tells me is that when I'm fighting a Tigrex, I'm going to want to hit it in the head for the most damage, as well as the forelegs. So the legs right in the front, when I hit all of those 3 things, that will the head and the forelegs, which there's 2 legs obviously, I'm going to do the most damage. So as a hunting horn or a hammer player using a blunt weapon, I'm going to focus on just those 2 locations as much as I can, because if I for example attack the back, I'm not going to really do that much damage. You can see 25 versus 70 is a massive difference. So essentially what you're looking for here is your weapon type. So are you a slashing weapon, are you a blunt weapon, or your ammo weapon? And then you're looking for the body parts that have the highest number so that you know what you should focus on. For example, the slashing one actually does a lot more damage to the tail, whereas the blunt one doesn't really do that much damage to the tail. But you will often notice that sometimes most of these weapons will actually do the same amount of damage to similar parts. Like for example, the head is always the weak spot on the Tigrex, no matter what weapon you're using against it. But some other monsters might have very different results regarding this. Let's talk about elements. Now certain weapons have certain types of elements. So if I go to my weapon right now, you can see the status of my weapon. You can see I have attack status, element, thunder. I do 34 thunder damage with my weapon, and you can also see my defense stats and my resistances against different monsters, which is something you should focus on when you go up against different monsters. Like if, for example, my ice resistance is really low, so if I go fight a Gosharog who is ice, he's going to do a lot more damage to me than I really want him to. For that case, I would change my armor to something that is more ice resistant and does a specific type of damage to that monster. Okay, so looking at Tigrex's form over here, you can see those 5 elements on the right side are fire, water, thunder, ice, and dragon elements. And what those numbers mean, the higher the number is, the more that actually does damage to this monster in particular. So you can see fire doesn't really do a lot of damage. If I hit the monster with fire in the head, it's not going to do anything. But if I hit the monster with fire in the abdomen, I'm actually going to do 10 damage, which is kind of odd. So his stomach can get burned, which is weird. But if you look at this table, you'll notice that the thunder has the biggest numbers, the 25 on the head, 20 for the foreleg, and so on. That tells me that using the thunder element against Tigrex is going to be the most beneficial, whereas if I was using fire, I'm not going to get any actual buff to my damage against Tigrex, it's just going to be like default damage. Whereas if I had a thunder weapon, I'm going to be doing a whole lot extra, and you can see this 25 really adds on to like that 70 for the hammer icon. And then you can see the second best element here is the dragon element right on the right side with the 15 and the 15 and the 15. And then obviously water as the third. Ice is also okay. Not really, it's actually terrible. It's only good for the head, the foreleg, and the abdomen and the back. And fire is obviously the worst. Every single monster will have different elements that they're weak to. So all you have to do is look under which element has the biggest numbers, and then that is the element that you're probably going to want to have your weapon do damage as against this monster. But you also can look at ailments against this monster in particular. Now this part is a little bit more confusing and took me a while to try and understand myself because I'm also new to Monster Hunter Rise, so a lot of the stuff is like very like, what am I looking at right now? Especially the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh, okay, stars, graphs, what? So essentially what this means is different effects that you can put onto the monster, for example, stunning the monster. And these are measured in 3 stars. So you can see all of these ones over here only go up to a maximum of 2 stars. So that means weapons that can give a blast status to the monster, or if I can use something that does a blast, like one of those explosion frogs, or a thunder beetle, which is the thunder blight over here, actually work the best against Tigrex. And everything else is a 1 star, so everything else will work, just not as good as blast and the thunder blight. Alright, so now I'm going to explain the bars that you can see on the right side that are kind of weird. The initial resistance, next resistance threshold, maximum resistance, natural build-up degradation, and the total damage, which actually that final one changes to effect duration, stamina loss, and different kind of effects as you change the different ailments. So the way you should look at this is that red bar on initial resistance shows me how likely it's going to be that I can apply poison. So you can see it's 2 bars. So that's 50%, right? But I want to show you something else. So if I look at the stun over here, you can see it's 1 bar of rate. Now this doesn't actually mean I'm more likely to stun him. It actually means there's a 25% chance or 25% build-up resistance of chance that I'm going to be able to stun this monster. So stunning Tigrex is not very easy to do, whereas poison is twice as likely that I'm going to be poisoning him. Resistance is obviously how long it takes until that effect is going to take place. The next resistance threshold is how long it's going to take for the next time you can poison or stun that monster. For example, so if I look at the initial resistance for stun, it's actually quite hard to stun him. You can look at its 3 empty bars to kind of stun a Tigrex. But for the next resistance threshold, it's 2 bars, so it's not going to take as long to stun him the second time that it was for the first time. As for its maximum resistance, you can see how much resistance it actually has against getting stunned or getting that effect. So for example, if I go to Blast, you can see his resistance, his maximum resistance is only 50%, which means he's much more likely to suffer from blast damage compared to something like stun, where his max resistance is actually 75%, which we're measuring the empty or the non-colored things. So the more color that you see on these bars means it's better for us. If it's empty and it's like not colored in, it's actually worse because stunning a Tigrex is very hard to do compared to, for example, Blast, where you can see its initial resistance is only 25% left over. Its next threshold is so close behind it, so you can explode this monster over and over, and its maximum resistance is only at 50%. And your natural build-up degradation is actually how much you can build up the kind of stun meter before it actually starts like going back down again. So you can't like hit a monster in the head every 5 minutes and hope that you're gonna knock it out like, on the 50th minute. What I have noticed is that the natural build-up degradation is pretty much the same for most of the ailments across most of the monsters. So that's not really something that you need to look at, so you don't have to worry about that too much. The final one is the measure of either the total damage, for example, poison. So you apply a poison effect to the monster. This is how much damage the poison is going to actually inflict on the monster. You can see there it does like 50%. But if we go to something like sleep, you can see the effect duration is 75% long. So if you manage to put Tigrex to sleep, he's going to sleep for a really long time. But in terms of Blast, you're only going to do 50% damage, but in Thunder Blight, your effect duration lasts up to 75%. So you're going to be able to stun the monster a lot easier if you do have Thunder Blight inflicted on the monster. Now, all of these different blights or these effects here do different things. Like Poison does a poison damage. Stun is obviously knocking the monster out and stunning them so that they can basically just, get smacked around. Paralysis is when you shock them, like with a shock trap, and then they kind of just shock on the spot there, and they give you like maybe 5 seconds to just do some damage quickly. Sleep is when the monster actually goes to sleep, and then you can do some big damage. Whatever attacks you're going to do are going to do some massive critical hits, so save your best attack for this moment, or use some big barrel bombs. Blast is the effect that you can do when something explodes on the monster, like an exploding frog or Magnamello's hammer weapons. The exhaust ailment is when you're hitting a monster, you'll actually drain its stamina so that it will become tired a lot more frequently. So it will become just like sluggish and slow and not attack you for a few seconds because it's too tired, and you'll see it's like panting. And this is a good time to unleash a lot of damage on it, or even trap them, which they will stay in the trap for a really long time, so you can even do more damage to them. Fire Blight is when the monster is on fire and they take burning damage. Water Blight is really good for monsters that are really hard, like for example the Diablos and the Baroth, monsters that like have a really tough skin. The Water Blight actually softens them up so that when you hit them, you can do a lot more damage to them because their skin is not as tough anymore with the water mixed with it. Thunder Blight makes it so that you can actually stun the monster a lot easier. So as you're hitting the monster, I believe you're able to stun it a lot quicker if you do have Thunder Blight on it. In terms of Ice Blight, I honestly actually don't know what Ice Blight does. It might actually be like a slowing effect. I haven't actually really used this one yet, so I'm not too sure. If you do know, let us know in the comments down below. Thanks. And that's pretty much all you have to look at is the physiology of the monster as well as the ailments to get an idea of how to best beat this monster with the most effective skill or ailments and usage of your weapons. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching.